Fred Kasajja, Deputy Secretary General, Justice Forum, JEMA, and a member of the iPod Council. Apologies for my party president, who stepped out because of other engagements, Mr. Vasalirwa, the summit chair. Mr. Moderator and the chairman of the Electoral Commission, mine will be observations. When we hear you speaking, it is as if you are that gentleman from Iraq. My Obi from Namyango can always help me with the name. He used to sugarcoat whatever he was packaging. And I come from a marketing background. I always sell items. I know how to twist words in order to attract my customers. Chairman of the Commission, you are doing the same. What you are packaging to us smells like sulfur. For those of you who did chemistry, you know how sulfur smells. In the first instance, the moment you went to State House to make what you called financial consultations with President Museveni, then you came back to the National Consultative Forum and other political stakeholders to consult. You watered down all your efforts. We are very skeptical about the way you go about this whole process. Mr. Museveni must have given instructions to do what you wish to do or what you even may not wish to do outside the interest of Ugandans. But don't forget, Uganda is still here. It will stay for the next years as long as we have gone. In the room, I don't see some other political parties. I don't want to talk for them. NRM, they are still fidgeting with their electoral process internally. I will not mention other political parties, but that is one of the ways. So what do you expect in other political parties? That's why you have to answer so many questions, 1,000 of them, about this fraudulent, purported scientific election process that we are organizing. I will not have kind words, you excuse me, Mr. Moderator. Article 61, as you quote it, clause 2, mandates you to call out an election expected to be free and fair. But in our eyes and interests of the majority of Ugandans, we don't think this election that you are purporting to call on would be free and fair, given the scenario and the soft visit you made at State House. The EC has been our AWA, absent without apology, in carrying out effective voter education, leaving it out to civil society and other groups who oftentimes have not delivered, whereas the law mandates you to effectively carry out voter education, which you have not done. Who owns these media houses? There are people in the ruling class, the radios, the TVs. Political parties have had a bit experience. We have been pulled out of radio stations despite of the fact that we have paid monies colossally to air out our views. And it is going to come. And you tell us that we're going to go for voter education through radios and TVs. How about the social media? We had an experience in the last elections. Social media was cut off by somebody. Is it Mutavaz? I don't know who is there. They keep on changing like dresses. Who is there? Anyway, social media, it is a problem. You control East on Danger Road, you don't control CPS. For you, you say we have advised them to do this, then they advised to do otherwise. We shall have cut off social media during that period of elections. And JEMA's take is, we stand for the elections to be carried on as normally prescribed by the law of the land, or alternatively, we postpone the elections until further notice when we feel that we shall have a free and fair elections. Uganda is not closing with Museveni, and it is not closing with you, Mr. Justice Byamukama. Not even me. You can still go on. We've been around. Kabaka was there. Obote was there. We saw Bina Isa and everybody. So in conclusion, the proposed revised election roadmap, Mr. Moderator, is an emptiness in the face of limited consultations in offering, tailored at galvanizing, vote reading, and incumbents recycling. I conclude.
In this twisted turn of history, the normal has become abnormal, and the abnormal is now the normal. In electoral terms, the public rally has become abnormal. And the scientific, I know that the EC said, went to great lengths to say this is not scientific, but what is in a name, whatever you call it, I think to me it ends up as scientific. The scientific election becomes the norm. And then against all this reality stands yet another reality. The reality of our sacred nation's constitution and all the laws that flow from them. Elections under the constitutional norm are predicated on the doctrines of 1, free and fair elections, 2, unrestrained public interface between the candidate and the electorate, and 3, the known hallmark of the public interface is the mass public rally, at which candidates and electorate gauge each other face to face at close quarters. They dance and boo. They applaud and deplore. They cheer and they jeer. Needless to say, the constraints of the corona pandemic cannot allow this carnival kind of election. I call it the corona curtain. A curtain has been erected. Call it the corona curtain. It stands immovable, impenetrable in the way of mass carnival kind of elections. What then do we do with the fundamental rights of the electorate under the solidly written within the sacred constitution? The Electoral Commission has come up with a raft of do's and don'ts: mask and sanitize and wash hands and only 2 people and distancing and so on. Wonderful. They've gone to extraordinary lengths to make it safe. And that's the way it should be. However, one asks oneself, why go to these extraordinary lengths to do the normal in the abnormal? Are there other alternatives? And I'm not trying to be critical to the Electoral Commission here. I'm simply going beyond the law. What the Electoral Commission has done is to try to build something within the existing law. But the existing law is the normal, and we don't have the normal. How do you create something in the normal using the abnormal? It begs the question. And my take on the whole thing is that the Electoral Commission has done a wonderful job in terms of their own mandate. What are they supposed to do within the law? And they've done a wonderful job there. But the elections are not about the Electoral Commission. The elections are for the electorate. Where is the raft of things that the electorate has brought forward to try to live within the norm, within this abnormality that we have today? The elections are about the candidates. Where are the candidates in this raft of measures that the electorate, the Electoral Commission has brought forward? It was said, and rightly so too, that the mass rally gives the opportunity to the electorate to express themselves, to listen to the candidate, to gauge the candidate at close quarters, and to be swayed. Mark you, there are people who come, election day comes, and they are not yet determined where to vote, whether to vote this one or the other one. They need to be persuaded. Now, if they are not going to meet at all by themselves, they will come only in a queue and wash their hands and sanitize and mask themselves. Something is missing there. Something that was in the Constitution, the spirit and soul of the Constitution, was not a scientific thing. That was not what was intended. The people here are shortchanged, so to speak, the electorate. The candidates equally, they're supposed to be in that carnival and persuade as many people with their body language, with their vocabulary, with their everything, with their touch, with their hugging. That is now denied. And at the end of it all, you ask yourself, why must we do so much to chase after the wind? In a sense, there will really be not the election as that was intended by our constitutional framers. So why go everywhere and do everything possible to have it? In a sense, to hold elections, conventional ones, under these circumstances, is to let the people die. Are we then saying that elections at every cost, even at the cost of death? Or are there other alternatives? Someone touched on what if we said let this wait as we prepare ourselves, as we look for another alternative to scientific or to this forced congested election? The query to that was, how long? But my answer to that is, where are we going? How long? 1 year? 6 months? As long as it takes to have a proper arrangement to address this abnormality, maybe. Another issue is, when you look at the whole thing, you get the idea that we are doing everything to dodge the articles of the Constitution which may not allow what we are trying to put forward. It reminds me, when I was chair of the Judicial Service Commission, there came a time when we had to choose a Chief Justice for this country. And there was a school of thought which said, let us do X. And we said, if you do X, you'll be offending Article so-and-so. They said, in that case, then we go to Article Z. We said, but if you do that, you'll be offending something else there. Then they said, okay, we can come back to X. And at that point came when I had to say, do we want to choose a Chief Justice of the Republic of Uganda by interpretation? Is that what was intended? There is a way to choose this person. Why must we go dodging A and B and C and D? This looks like what we are trying to do right now. We are dodging the washing, we are dodging the mask, we are dodging the sanitizing, we are dodging the distancing, we are dodging everything. But then what are we left with? A desert, a minefield which is unknown. There are mines everywhere, and you go dodging them, and at the end of it all, you establish a new government for this country. Is that what was intended in the soul of the Constitution? Is the Electoral Commission ready? They've said everything is congested. The timelines are now so critical. Ballot printing must be done now. Everything is tight. And indeed, the whole country is not breathing. We'll be going to the polling booths with the masks congested. We can't breathe. There's a knee on our neck. Can't breathe. Must we go through with this? Or is there some other way? I raise all of this because I represent the Elders Forum and the Inter-Religious Council of Uganda, whose reason for living, raison d'etre, is to dialogue. And so I thank
that people have to hold meetings to, further their manifestos.
But the third one is the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association. In other words, that people have to associate, whether through political parties, pressure groups, alliances, coalitions, and so on and so forth. So anything that sets a limitation on those three key elements really has an effect on the very meaning of democratic elections. But I also want to observe that Uganda is lucky in the sense that it has examples and prototypes of that it can see from, of countries that have gone to elections during COVID times. Malawi went to its polls on the 23rd of June, and it had open air campaigns that adhered to health and safety measures. In some places they were observed, in others they were not. So people had to have masks, they had to hand sanitize, they had to keep social distances. In some places they kept the health and safety guidelines, in others they didn't. But what we see from Malawi is that on the 23rd of June, Malawi had about 800 cases of COVID. A couple of weeks later, Malawi has, I think, 2,400 cases. Then we look at Zambia, that has had just regional elections, 5 regional elections. And they put a limitation on numbers of people that could actually take part in a political meeting to 50 or less. But even then, we can see a clear pattern between the regions where these elections were held and the rise in infections in those particular regions. I'll not repeat the story of Burundi and its election, you know it. Now, Uganda is not Malawi, it is not Zambia, it is not Burundi, neither is it Benin. So I think Uganda must find its own model of managing its affairs. Even in the most critical moments like these, I think we should be alive to our capacities and capabilities. I don't think we should afford to take extreme views on any of, as we come up with our own model. Yes, the Electoral Commission has read out the guidelines, the standard operating procedures for each of the electoral activities, but we have to ask, do we have an independent oversight mechanism to monitor the implementation of these guidelines? You've seen the custodians of these guidelines are already contravening them. And I think for us that should be a very serious issue that we should be contemplating about. Where is the mechanism to monitor the implementation of these guidelines? Secondly, we seem to conceive campaigns as a one-way traffic, but campaigns are two-way. Political meetings are two-way. People have to ask questions. Have we thought through about the technicalities of how we promote interaction when we choose to go digital, like we've said? But also, I think we also need to learn from the experiences of the other countries, that many of the countries that have gone to elections during COVID have suffered very low voter turnout levels. How are we doing in terms of our voter mobilization and voter education ahead of the 2021 elections? We're about 6 months away. So for me, I think what Ugandans want is that sincere assurance that even as we embrace the changes that have been impressed upon us by COVID, the voters, the candidates, and all other stakeholders should feel that they will have a fair go at the election at the end of the day.
On the side of Uganda People's Congress, we have endeavored to do all the necessary activities which would prepare us for the general elections. And we greatly appreciate the efforts from the Electoral Commission to have these stakeholder meetings from time to time, as it gives us a position to air out the difficulties we face and the challenges as we go ahead with this process. I would like to point out from the very beginning that there's one key stakeholder who has been consistently absent in all of these stakeholder meetings. And this is basically the Ministry of Health. We talk about the health guidelines, but those health guidelines are not clearly spelled out as far as the politics is concerned. We are very clear that funerals are supposed to be 50 people, family. We are clear if you're entering a shopping center, you must sanitize, wash hands. All of these other guidelines are extremely clear, except when it comes to politics. And when it comes to politics, we are being pushed from side to side. Last time we had the engagement with the Electoral Commission, the chair tactfully said that we should do our politics but conform with the health guidelines. Left us in the blue. As we're trying to get into this program as UPC to set ourselves up for our delegates conference, we wrote to the police and gave the police our activities leading to the delegates conference. They wrote back and they said, you're free to do everything except regional conferences and district conferences, which was the purpose for which we wrote. But we shall liaise with Electoral Commission and follow the health guidelines. We don't know those guidelines. And all these processes which we need to do must involve meetings. Within the party structure, it is those conferences which are going to be the determinant to give us our candidates. So we must have those meetings. Even if we're to downsize, we must also try to remain within our constitutions. For example, for the delegates conference of UPC, for it to be a valid delegate conference, the quorum is 1/2. For the other conferences, the quorum is 1/3. So it is possible to reduce the numbers attending these meetings, but provided we still remain within that legal framework whereby we are still going to be within our constitution and avoid legal challenges thereafter, even from within our own parties. Because we do suffer those challenges after, especially primaries. You get those who are bitter, they will end up going to court and would run into a lot of those difficulties. If these matters were very clear, it would help us to move ahead. And also to add on to what Crispy raised, of recent we have seen the head of the Ministry of Health not abiding by the very guidelines which are still not clear. But some of those guidelines of gatherings, all of us would love to have gatherings. All of us would love to have our processions. But we have endeavored to do our politics as best as we can within the framework of what is generally agreed. Because it is clear globally, this corona has changed the way of doing things. We live in the most uncertain times. Nothing is what it used to be. But as we try our level best to handle the politics, to articulate our messages, but also to develop our, go through our processes, to present our candidates for the general elections, there needs to be some level of cooperation. And I would request that in the next engagement which we have, let the Ministry of Health actually be there and let us get some clear pronouncements, because it would help us to pass the message. I think Crispy raised the issue of in Zambia there was a minimum of 50. If we have a clear minimums, we would also be able to communicate within our party structures. And I've been pleasantly pleased that many of these other guidelines, even if you go to the deepest village, you find that people are trying to comply with these guidelines. You find hand washing facilities, you find soap laid out. So let us also be clear on the politics. Otherwise, we're in this limbo. And at this point, we still have a dilemma, because we've set our delegates conference for the 1st of August. I'm not sure how it is going to be, even if for some, if we, for example, we're able to secure the airstrip down the road to hold a delegates conference where there's plenty of space, even if you get the tents. I am not sure that we are going to be able to be cleared for such an issue. But if we have that engagement, and where we can agree that if I have half of my members to meet the quorum, and we do the social distancing and all the processes, I'll be comfortable moving ahead.
I'll speak on two areas. The first is about the fundamentals, and secondly, I'll talk about media, because the main arena for voter engagement is going to be the media. The first time I visited London as a young student, I used the underground train known as the Tube. Whenever a train stopped, there would be a loud voice on the PA system announcing, "Mind the gap. Mind the gap. Mind the gap." The gap between the train, which moves, and the platform, which does not move. My Lord Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, today we are engaging because we want you to mind the gap between what is convenient and what is right. We may not close the gap today, but your willingness to engage is worthy of praise. You know how much pressure we have subjected you to. You have tried to deflect the pressure to the Ministry of Health, to Parliament, but we have insisted. On behalf of DP, I congratulate you for this good beginning. We believe that the move from so-called scientific elections to hybrid is itself a remarkable step. Today, let's begin the process of unpacking the hybrid. We have some concerns as the key actors. Number one, consultation should not be sporadic. Let's put it in the timetable that every so often the key actors will meet. We should have a joint forum because we may also be quarreling among ourselves, not necessarily with you. We also believe that you had the discretion to propose emphatically whether, according to you and the Ministry of Health, the elections were possible or not. You have told the nation that the Ministry of Health said the election should go ahead with some restrictions. You told us that the President directed you to the Ministry of Health, and whatever restrictions are dictated by the Ministry of Health guidelines. You have also acknowledged the problems that come with COVID-19, and that is why you are leaning heavily on the provisions that give you discretion. This discretion is not absolute. That's why we are going to continue pushing you to exercise your discretion in the interest of what is right rather than what is convenient. Now, on the media, we note that over the last 2 decades, there has been a remarkable expansion of communication in the world. Ugandans are constantly inundated by the transmission of ideas due to the ubiquitous apparatus available for transmission of news, views, entertainment, information, and even propaganda. The vast network of communication penetrates all corners, no matter how remote. Daily, words and pictures intrude our surroundings. Our eyes and ears are continuously hammered by words and pictures. Today, a whisper can be magnified so many times due to the impact of various media. Democracy and media are now inseparable. Indeed, democracy has now evolved into a mediocracy. The media, as a system of amplification, is critical in this season of elections amidst COVID-19. Media houses, and in particular talk show hosts, are going to wield so much power over public opinion to an unprecedented level. This power must be tempered with a high level of social consciousness and a sense of responsibility to promote socially constructive public discourse. The media can build or destroy. In 1994, over a short period of 100 days, over 1 million ethnic Tutsis were murdered in Rwanda in an orgy of violence that shocked the world. This genocide was accomplished largely because the media, especially the radio known as Radio Mille Collines, and its talk show hosts actively promoted the ideology of genocide. We can avoid and prevent genocide in Uganda by consciously looking for common ground among public actors, and you can facilitate this engagement through the Uganda Communications Commission. Elections should not be a struggle for survival. They should be a competition to serve. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to say that there is confusion. When we were presenting to us, you shifted from scientific to hybrid. Outside, we're already confused about scientific. Now you are giving us hybrid. I hope there will be enough time for us to go out and be educated about this kind of voting or election process. I would like to say also that in the roadmap and in all the presentations, I noticed one thing, that there is no inclusivity. And I know very well that the Electoral Commission has a gender policy. I'm hoping that moving forward, you are going to make sure that you make whatever you are preparing gender responsive. The reason why I'm saying this is that if we are to continue and have this hybrid sort of elections, there are so many challenges that the women, youth, and people with disabilities are going to have. For example, if we are going to use radios, televisions, how many do we have in the country? What is the coverage? Have you established the coverage, and therefore have you put in place means and measures to actually address that gap? Are you going to work, for example, with the different networks? Are you going to work with the Ministry of Information so that we are able to have, say, waivers on OTT? Are we going to have complementary airtime for the women, for the youth? And when it comes to the people of disabilities, what measures are you putting in place to make sure that they actually either are helped with the different gadgets? There has already been a lot of violence related to COVID. How are you sure that this violence won't escalate? We know very well that control, access, and ownership of radios and TVs in homes has a lot of politics. You know, there are men who have the radios. When it is time for his time to listen in, he will actually insert the cells. When it is time for the woman and the children, he will carry away the cells and leave the radio that is blank. How sure, therefore, are you that we are going to have inclusive elections? The other is about the lack of skills and knowledge to access, utilize, and even benefit from the digital campaigning. Are there plans by the Electoral Commission to help these disadvantaged groups of people to bridge that gap? We also know that this time, the different civil society organizations, especially organizations like Action for Development, would be out now preparing and conducting civic education and voter education. But we also know that with the limitations, we are unable to do that. Are you aware, therefore, that we might actually get a lot of invalid ballot papers? Have you considered that? If I am to conduct trainings for the women candidates, what should I do? What you are actually presenting to us is about the election. How about when we are preparing? How should the women, the youth, and the people with disabilities benefit so that they can actually participate as citizens who will exercise their rights in choosing the leaders of their choice?
That does not lie in the mandate of the Electoral Commission. They cannot postpone the election. It lies elsewhere. We, the people, Parliament, and other fora. And so when I spoke about, is this a matter of life and death, that we must go through this, knowing very well that maybe to have a vote, to do the vote, is to die. What I had in mind, can we wait a little bit, gauge the mood of the corona, where is it going, up or down, sideways or behind or front, and see what we can do with that. I think we have agreed that Uganda will be here tomorrow, the day after, to be here. Why not wait a little bit and do that? And therefore, the mandate to do that is not for the Electoral Commission, it's not for this forum where we are at, it's for all of us. If ever there was a reason and a justification to touch the Constitution, this is the time, and Corona would be the reason. And we'll put all our heads together and see where do we go. Is that Constitution adequate to do the postponement?